And welcome everyone to God's Views on Political News. Good to have you back again this week. Remember, during the time that we're talking, it's okay to comment, to ask any questions that you want. Don't worry about interrupting us. We enjoy the interruptions. I think
it's just time to think of something to say.
Exactly. And so I want to wish everybody out there a happy Hanukkah. I know it starts today, so we're a little bit early with that. But Bill, you have plans for tonight?
Well, tonight, yes, begins Hanukkah. So my wife and the kids here in the next hour or two will be getting all of the stuff set out for Hanukkah because she tries to make it, festive. And yeah, we'll light lights and eventually we'll get around to cooking things to, those traditional things. We don't go full bore, like some, but yeah, we'll do different things. And I'm speaking this weekend in just outside of Mobile, Alabama, actually in Mississippi, at a Hanukkah conference.
Nice.
So that'll be nice. So
wow, very good. Well, Linda says shalom. So shalom to you, Linda. And
shalom to her.
And as I said, please feel free to ask any questions, make any comments during the show, and we'll get started. Bill, I tell you, there was as you know, what could have potentially been a very bad situation in New York City with the terrorist bomber attack the other day. This was a 27-year-old from Bangladesh who came to the United States under chain migration. And he had a pipe bomb strapped around his body. All of these are, of course, allegations, and okay. Quote unquote allegations. And it detonated prematurely, or I don't know what would have happened. I'm surprised that he still has, his body intact from that premature detonation of the.
Yeah, according to what I read, he won't be having children anytime soon.
Ooh,
so,
wow.
Okay. Take it for what it's worth.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I heard there were lacerations and burns and everything else on his body.
Yeah. Well, you set a pipe bomb, strap it to your body and detonate it. That's what happens, I guess.
And I guess he was headed towards the bus station in the Port Authority bus station?
I understood. Well, I don't know if it was a bus station or if it was a subway station, with the Port Authority. But it was in Midtown, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm. So, Times Square.
Well, that area, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, if you've ever been there, there's just gazillions of people everywhere, and particularly in those subway stations, it's just miles and miles of people. So, yeah, it's amazing that no one was seriously injured other than this fella. But anyway.
Yeah, I saw the video where he was laying there on the sidewalk, and I'm surprised again too that it didn't kill him. Now, from what I'm hearing is that he learned how to make that pipe bomb where he works. I don't know where he works. I'd like to kind of know what they do there. It kind of makes me a little nervous of, what he learned on his job.
Well, that's the day and age in which we live. People can do things like that, and some people are determined to do it. And so, God had mercy on a lot of people yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the people that the first responders were very good as always in what they were doing. I was a little surprised in New York in that they came out very quickly and said this is a terrorist attack. It can be really obvious, and nobody, it seems like in New York, wants to call it what it really is.
Well, the mayor certainly doesn't seem to be inclined to identify things the way they really are. I don't know about the rank and file New Yorker, but the government right now doesn't seem to be. So, yeah, a little bit surprising, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And I was also surprised. There was another gentleman that was there at the press conference, and it wasn't the mayor, it wasn't the governor, and I don't know who he was because I didn't catch the guy's name. But I did catch something that I always catch when you hear progressives on the left talking, and that is, this is the new normal. That was the words out of his mouth. Now, I think that's very dangerous to think that way because politically, looking at things in that regard, when you are willing to accept things as the new normal, that means you're not going to look for a change and you're not going to try to stop what appears in this case. Again, chain migration, people coming in here, just so happened and I know this is going to be shocking to you, Bill, but he came in under President Obama, when Obama was in office. When we were told by the State Department that they couldn't do proper vetting because there's no way to know who these people were, how fast they were coming in, what their ties were, and they can lie a lot. And so there was no way to even be sure who was going. I know.
They wouldn't do that.
I'm just saying if they did. Yeah.
Okay. If they did that. Okay.
If they did that.
Okay.
So,
all right, so he came in under that scenario. So not a big surprise.
Not a big surprise. And the number of people that they were allowing in each year under the Obama administration was just enormous. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people coming in each year without being vetted and coming into our country. Many of them due to the chain migration or just coming here working on visas and things of that nature. And I'm going to say it. Thank God for President Trump, because he's cut that statistics there, the figure, the number of people coming into the United States. He's cut it to more than half of the people now aren't coming in anymore under President Trump getting out there and saying enough is enough, that we need people properly vetted and we need to know who people are before they come in. And we want people to come into this country not being on welfare, but people who can take care of themselves and people who have somewhat of an education. So, I mean, for that regard, what do you think about that policy? I think it's wonderful myself.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's common sense, but common sense isn't so common anymore, is it?
Right.
Well, there's a biblical principle that says that we are to know those who labor among us. And that is to say, you don't just in a spiritual setting or fellowship or ministry, what have you, you just don't take somebody in off the street who just says, I'm a believer. No, you have to examine their fruit to make sure that what they do matches what they say. So if I may take that principle and apply it to this situation, because most of the Bible is common sense, you have to know those people who are coming into this country. Just because they say I'm not a terrorist, obviously doesn't mean that they're not a terrorist. Just because they say I'm not, radicalized, doesn't mean they're not radicalized. So the fruit needs to match what they say. And so I support President Trump's position on this. I realize that some people are in the camp that, in trying to be so rigid about this, some good people are going to get, caught up in this. They're going to not be able to immigrate and things like that. And there's no perfect way to do this, I don't think. But there does come a point in time you have to say, look, for the good of the nation at large, we have to be willing to say no sometimes.
Right.
And I just think that's common sense.
And what do you say to those people? Because Bill, I'm telling you, I get this argument every single time, typically from those on the far left who say, yes, but Jesus would allow everybody in. Jesus would have opened the doors. Jesus wouldn't have borders.
You know what? Hockey puck. Okay, that was a Don Rickles thing, wasn't it? Okay.
For those who are young enough to know.
Baloney or whatever. Look, there are. I can think of at least a couple parables right off the top of my head. Now, we're not talking about immigration into a country. We're talking about entrance into the kingdom of heaven. Just off the top of my head, there's one parable about 5 foolish virgins, 5 wise virgins. And because the foolish didn't have oil, weren't ready to go, by the time they got to the wedding, the door was shut. And he said, I don't know you. You're not coming in. The door's already shut. God shut the door on the ark. And after he shut the door, nobody could get in. The congregation of Philadelphia is told in Revelation chapter 3, God opens a door that no man can shut, and he shuts and no man can open. There's a parable about a man who threw a wedding for his son, and he sent his servants out into the highways and byways. And one guy came in and he didn't have a proper wedding garment. And he said, toss him out. So I know it's apples and oranges that we're discussing here, but for people to say, oh, Jesus wouldn't do that. Yeah, he would. If you don't meet the criteria for the kingdom of heaven, you won't enter the kingdom of heaven. There will not be open borders in that sense that it's just whoever wants to get in, however you want to live. It doesn't work that way. So when it comes to a nation, I don't think it is unmerciful. I don't think it's being uncompassionate to establish certain standards. And to use the word vet, whatever terminology you want to use, to take these people one at a time, case by case, and take the time to see who is this person, family that is wanting to come into our country. Because listen, there's a lot of people in this world that don't like us.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who want to destroy us. And so the adversary always looks to sow tares in the midst of the wheat. And he successfully does that when men are sleeping. They're not on guard. They're not paying attention to what's going on. So anyway, I would wholeheartedly disagree with those who try to use the Bible and God's compassion to say he wouldn't have any borders. God's the one who established borders in the beginning.
Right. And he also told us, you see time and time again in the Bible where people are protecting themselves, protecting their livelihood, their stock, the people in the camps that they're in. So it'd be foolish to think that you're just supposed to open up the borders, throw down your weapons and say, come on in. I mean, that goes against everything in the Bible, in my opinion.
Well, to kind of balance this out, there is a scripture that says, where he speaks to Israel, and he says, you need to be kind to the strangers that are among you, because you need to remember that you were once a stranger in the land of Egypt. However, he also says that if you, and I'm paraphrasing this, that if you are a stranger and you come into his family called Israel, then you are to adopt the laws of Israel. There's to be one law for both the homeborn and for the stranger. So if, again, I can take that concept and apply it to this topic, if you're going to come here, you want to come here, great. Bring your culture, bring your family, as long as, your motives are proper and pure, and you intend to become an American. You intend to adopt to our ways. I would even go so far as to say our language. I'm not saying you have to forget your native tongue. I'm just saying, hey, you're going to have to learn the language we speak around here. I know that's going to set some people off potentially, but I'm sorry. That's just how I feel. Not saying you can't preserve your culture. We're a melting pot. I get that. But we should all come together as one and as countrymen. And those who have another agenda are going to try to undermine what this country is all about.
Yeah, I think we used to be a melting pot, and I don't think we are anymore.
You don't think so?
No, I don't. I think I'm going to come into the United States, not everyone, but some people with the attitude, I'm going to come into the United States and I'm going to continue to live my life the way that I want to. I mean, let's look at Minnesota as a perfect example. Dearborn, Michigan is a perfect example of that. Where another culture, I'm just going to say Islam, that it would come in, and these people who follow the Quran to the T and say, this is my, I've now made a country within America. And that's why I'm saying this doesn't apply to all people, all immigrants who are coming here. But I say there are definitely some who are doing that, and they don't want to assimilate.
Well, I mean, if you come from Pakistan and you want to be a Pakistani living in America, then there should be limits on how long you should stay here and be a Pakistani in America. If you come from Pakistan and you bring your Pakistani culture into the United States, but you want to be an American, I say, come on, Yeah. I don't think that it's unreasonable to expect that of people,
Right. And the vetting process, as we all know, it's very difficult because of the fact that if you follow the Quran and you believe in Islam and the strong principles of Islam, they tell you that you can lie about being a Christian. You can say you're a Christian when you're not. You can lie about why you are in the country, because if your goal is to, let's say, come to America, to carry on and take over and cause the infidel to submit, then you can say and do anything you want. And so that's what makes the vetting process so difficult. Under Obama, I think he just kind of overlooked all that because he wanted everybody to come.
Obama claimed to be a Christian.
Yeah, exactly. And then, and there's been a dispute about that until this day. And now Linda says, how can you vet fruit? Which is, I know maybe she's a little joke there, but it's absolutely true. How can you? Again, just pointing out the difficulties of somebody who follows the Quran.
Well, there isn't any perfect way to deal with this, granted. But the first thing is to start with, in my view anyhow, is kind of what Trump is trying to do, is to say, hey, we're going to stop just kind of letting anybody in anytime, anyway, and we're going to start checking these people out, to see who and what is coming into this country. Some will slip through. I mean, I don't think anybody's under any illusion that you're going to filter out every threat to the country. I remember reading the Reagan Diaries several years ago. It's basically a book where Ronald Reagan kept a diary throughout his presidency, and he chronicled almost every day of his presidency. And I remember that there was an entry in his diary all the way back in 1986 where the head of the CIA at the time, and I forget the man's name, but he had met with Reagan. And basically in 1986, they were concerned that among all of the illegal immigrants coming across the southern border from Mexico and South America, that among them were militant Islamists, I think was the terminology used. And that was in 1986. Yeah. Right. So I don't guess there's any way that you can filter out every threat, but we can try. Yeah. We can make attempts to try. And then when someone is obviously a threat and they do something that is aggressive, they need to be gone. Period. Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree. And this man, potentially the one in the bomber in New York, again, I said he was from Bangladesh, and he said one of the reasons that he did what he did the other day was because of the fact that, President Trump made the announcement that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel. And that sort of ticked him off, and that's all he needed to hear. You get somebody like that who's in this country like he was, and if he's following ISIS, and he was ISIS inspired at least, this is the result that you're going to get. So we're thinking about now new people coming in. What about all the people that we have, again, in here already from the Obama administration? So we've got the enemy within and we've got the enemy without that we have to be concerned about.
I'm more concerned about the enemy within, to be frank. I want to say it was Lincoln, and I don't want to try to quote him if it wasn't, but it's something to the effect that if America is going to, collapse, it won't be because of an external foe. It will be because of the enemy within. And the reason I refer to that, because that is biblically accurate. Israel as a nation, just the modern Israel, just since 1948, there's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 wars that I can think of, conventional wars, and in each of those wars, Israel has always come out on top, always. Okay, because they're fighting a conventional force on a conventional battlefield, fighting these external foes. Where Israel has run into problems is not the foe from without, but the foe from within, the intifadas and these kinds of things. So, and that is a wheat and tear concept in, being manifested before us. It's the tares, not in their own field, that pose the biggest problem. It's the tares amongst the wheat. So in America, that's always been my, I don't want to say fear, but concern. It's the threat that will come from within. And by the way, it doesn't have to be ISIS.
Yeah, I know.
It can be Antifa. It can be elements of the BLM. It can be elements of the Democratic Party. It can be Code Pink. It can be the Freedom from Religion Foundation. These kinds of groups, they are just as dangerous. And on that note, and I don't want to run away with the conversation here, but while I'm thinking about it, this fellow's family says that he reacted because Trump acknowledged what everybody already knew, and that was Jerusalem was the capital of Israel. So he used that as an excuse. And how many groups do we have in this country that use other things that they don't like as an excuse to go out and break stuff and burn stuff and protest and this kind of thing? Same spirit, Susan.
Yeah, absolutely. And you make a good point, because it's not only the let's say the illegal immigrants that are coming in here, or those that were partially vetted that are coming in here that could potentially be the enemy within. It's the groups that protect those people as well, and say that they want to give those people as really potentially as many rights as most Americans have. And those people are just as scary to our rights and to our well-being as anybody else. And I'm just going to say it, the ACLU, the people who say, oh, but wait a minute, this person that they have a right to be here, that type of thing on somebody who's coming into this country. Those people, like the ACLU, they're protecting those individuals that may potentially harm the safety and well-being of Americans. So they're the enemy within as well, I think. Well,
in some ways, they're more dangerous than some guy that's going to strap a pipe bomb to his midsection. Not that I'm saying that that's okay, but some of these lawyers for the ACLU and some of these other groups are a lot more dangerous. A socialist senator from Vermont is a lot more dangerous, in my view anyway, than a guy wearing a pipe bomb.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And Monique says, it is audacious for anyone to go to another country with the notion they can disobey the laws of that country and or change the laws. I've been to and have lived in a few different countries and understand sharing my ideas about the cultural differences, but have never attempted to change or break their laws. It's astonishing to see this happening in our country, and takes me back to biblical times. And really, you only see that a lot in this country. You wouldn't dare go to, I wouldn't go across the border right here in California, go to Mexico and try to tell Mexico how to run their country. They'd be saying, get back across the border unless you want to go to jail. I mean, it just wouldn't happen.
Yeah. The word idiot comes to mind when I think of those who have perpetrated this way of thinking that, people who come here just automatically have every right that a citizen has. I'm sorry. Like it was mentioned just now. I've been to a lot of different countries in the world, and they did not bestow upon me the same rights and privileges as those who were of that nation. I was a visitor. It's like going into somebody's house. I wouldn't go into your house and tell you decorated this wrong. You shouldn't do things this way. You shouldn't raise your children that way. I would respect the fact that this is your house, because when you come to my house, I expect you to respect that. Yeah. So, but idiots, I'm sorry. What is it? What is the saying about the patients are in charge of the hospital or something like that? The psych ward or whatever. The psych ward, yeah.
Jeffrey said the enemy here are the lawyers, sorry, Susan, and the liberals who don't know, accept or recognize scripture. I don't practice law anymore, Jeffrey, so I'm not offended. So I'm a recovering attorney, as they say. And Monique said, I firmly believe the uprising will come from within. Look at Soros and his influence with Obama's OFA and Antifa movements, very concerning. And it really is. And the more and more we see, at least in my opinion, I see a lot of people on the left just, again, in trying to enforce rights that don't exist, trying to tell other people that they do have a right to be here. They do have a right to come into Bill's house and tell Bill how to decorate or do anything else in his house. That's what we're seeing. It's taking away our rights and saying that the people coming in actually have more rights than we do.
Well, and again, I go back to this. It's not those people that are coming in that I see as the larger threat.
Yeah.
It's the people who are creating this environment whereby those that come in think they do have same rights as you and I. Those are the people who are creating the danger.
Right. And Jeffrey's making a good point here. He said, true, Bill, but the progressives say that our Constitution applies to everyone, regardless of whether they are a resident or not. And see, that is the problem. And that is those people who are espousing that idea, those are the enemy. Like the ACLU, they do believe that. And by doing that, they take away our rights. And if you don't agree with it as an American citizen, that means that you are a racist. That's, and that's what's happening.
Yeah, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're this, you're that. And I've just kind of come to the conclusion, they're going to call me that anyway. So I don't let that stymie me. I don't let that silence me. They're not going to agree with me, and I'm not going to agree with them. So, they might as well just, call me what they're going to call me.
And see, I agree with you, Bill, but as we sort of, as our society sort of disintegrates, if you will, into the end times, and we're told that it will be happening, I think it could become very dangerous that the people who have thoughts like you and I do about, what their laws really are, and what the ACLU sees, and UCLA too, by the way. I
was going to say, what's the difference? Never mind.
It's the same thing. I can see that causing people to be arrested, and people to be tried and, for crimes for believing that way.
Yeah. Well, that's coming.
It is coming.
I think we've only been given a reprieve from that, frankly.
I do too.
I think if the trends had continued, the trends that were started in the Obama administration, and to some degree before that, but really, got on a fast track during the Obama administration. If someone whose name shall not be mentioned had been elected president, I think it's very likely that people who are labeled a certain way could be charged with certain things or drug into court. And in fact, there was well, I don't want to get ahead of our topic, in our topics today, but we live in a day and time where if you make an accusation, somebody's automatically guilty.
Right. And getting worse.
There's such a feeding frenzy now. And I want to choose my words carefully here. I'm not suggesting that everyone that is making an accusation in these, times is lying. I don't know. I'm just saying that it's like now people are so conditioned to just believing any accusation without any kind of proof, any kind of evidence whatsoever. In some situations, just get out of here. You're gone. You need to resign, this, that, and the other. And so it's not but a hop, skip, and a jump to Susan is a this and Bill is a that. And, you're hauled into court before you know it or worse. But believers need to resign themselves to this fact. The adversary is not called the accuser of the brethren for nothing. That's what he does. And we don't need to give him any ammunition to accuse us with. And by that, I mean, we need to live our lives in such a way that we're upright. We're doing what is right in God's eyes so that we don't give him reason to accuse us because he's going to do it anyway. Yeah. And we have to be, as believers, resigned to the fact that we are going to face accusations, corporately and individually. And we're going to face false accusations. The story of Jacob, and I won't get too long into that, but bottom line is when he was with Laban for 20 years working for him, he was falsely accused again and again and again and again. And God allows that to happen sometimes, Susan, not to expose the wickedness of others as much as to see what's in our heart. So this is where things will go. Maybe not today, but this is where things will go.
I don't know. I'm thinking today because, I've never seen things happen so quickly. I mean, if you can't even talk about news today. If you don't talk about it today, it's old news by tomorrow. So, and Jeffrey's saying, why do we even have, immigration laws? And it says if the politicians, lawyers and bleeding heart liberals aren't going to enforce them. And Jeffrey, what I would say is that, we may be not too far off from not having immigration laws or severely trying to cut down on our immigration laws because it is headed that way. And under President Trump, again, thank God for President Trump, he's the one trying to enforce the laws we have. He's also the one who is trying to make sure that this chain migration and even people with green cards we look at them differently, we vet them differently, and we try to enforce our laws better and create new laws that will protect Americans more, because America needs to come first and be protected.
Well, I think we're headed toward being lawless, period.
We are.
Immigration laws, whatever. I just think we're headed toward a lawless society because, and I don't think it's exclusive to the United States either, frankly. But, we have laws, we pass laws, but we are always looking to make more laws because, like gun control, for instance, we don't even enforce the laws that are on the books, and others are wanting to make other laws. Basically doing things that are lawless. Abortion, okay, that's a law, but it's lawless in nature, according to the way God looks at it. So I think that's where we're headed, and if the law says this, but I feel this way today,
right?
Well, we'll ignore the law. That's where we're headed, and that's going to create chaos. And when you have chaos, that's when a tyrant steps in.
Yeah. And we have a lot of those tyrants, and I call them elitists, progressives, and globalists, all the same thing. And they can be on the left, they can be on the right, and that's what we see. They have to have chaos created in order to stay and maintain control, and that's what they do. And putting in.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So we better get smart.
We better get smart pretty fast.
Okay, that went right over your head. Never mind. It'll hit you at 2:00 this morning. Chaos, get smart. Oh, never mind.
Like 99 and
smart.
Yeah.
Chaos. Okay.
Bill's going back in time. A lot of people probably don't even remember who this is. Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry. I couldn't resist. So.
I was just hoping you weren't talking about it, but let's let's go on to Roy Moore. The election is today in Alabama. People of Alabama are going to make that decision. Whether or not to elect Roy Moore, whether or not they believe the allegations. What are your thoughts, Bill?
Same as they were a few weeks ago. If the man actually did something criminal, then he should step aside and he should answer for those actions. If he did something criminal, if he did something in bad taste 40 years ago, but has repented of it, then I don't think he should step aside. Because who has it? I mean, come on. What's the senator from New York that took Hillary Clinton's Senate seat, Gillibrand or Jill, whatever her name is? The woman she cusses worse than a sailor. God only knows what other things go on in her life, and she's going to take the moral high ground here. Give me a break. So if Moore did something criminal, he should step aside. He should answer to that. If he did something in bad taste, he's turned away from it and he's repented of it, then I think he should just move on. If he's innocent of all of this, as he claims to be, then these people that are making these accusations better watch out. I mean, it's coming their way. So, I don't know. I don't know who's telling the truth. I mean, how could I? If I were in Alabama and I was going to go to a polling station today, I think what I would do is adopt this policy. An accusation does not constitute guilt. If there is evidence, absolute concrete evidence of this, and let's face it, in the last week, some other news come out that one of these accusers forged some things or, kind of fudged a little bit on some things. If there was concrete evidence, or if there's not concrete evidence that these things he's being accused of is true, and then I compare that to the fact that for 40 years he's been in public service in the state of Alabama, and there are things that can be documented that he did, things that I agree with, things that he stood up for. Those are the things that are going to determine my decision. So, if I was going to go to a polling booth today in Alabama, that's what would be on my mind, and I would probably end up pulling the lever for Roy Moore. Now, I say that, and I need to say this. That doesn't mean he didn't do these things. It just means that I can't prove he did these things, and I'm not going to condemn somebody that you can't prove it. I'm just not. I can't do that.
Yeah, there was a rally last night. Steve Bannon was there again in support of Roy Moore. So was Sheriff Clark was there as well. And also Roy Moore's wife stood up and said, I've known this man for 30 some years. We met in Bible study. He was a good Christian man. That's why I'm with him. He's a good father, a good husband, and a good grandfather. Of course, that doesn't mean a lot in a court of law. I get that. But this is a woman that knows him, and I don't know. I don't know either one of them, but if she is who she says she is, I think that if all of these came to light and something that he did was criminal and immoral, this woman would be the first to speak out against him.
You would think so. You would think so. Well, that's what I mean. We're living in this day and time when if someone makes an accusation, the accuser should just automatically be believed. Well, that's biblically not correct.
Yeah.
Now the accuser may be telling the truth, right, but the Bible sets standards and our laws set standards.
Yeah.
That, an accusation doesn't constitute truth. It needs to be proven. There needs to be evidence presented. And this is one of those situations that there isn't anything but she says this and he says that.
Right.
And I am not going to, I'm not going to condemn someone just based on something someone said. I want to see the evidence. And so again, I say that is inconclusive on the one side of the ledger, but what he has done in public life is documented.
Yeah.
These are things I know to be a fact. And so those are the things that are going to weigh heavy on me, and that's why I say if I were in Alabama, that's probably what I would end up doing.
Yeah. And it's like Catherine says, why didn't these women come forward 40 years ago? And again, a lot of people are asking those same questions. Times were different. Times have changed now. And I understand that. And Catherine, another Catherine says a lot of people that have known him for years say he's not like that. He's a good man. Known him for a lot of years. So,
yeah, right.
and you look at that, if he were called into a court of law, these people would be coming in as character witnesses. And I think what you were talking about in the one person, that was the woman with the yearbook whose stepson said that she's a liar. That's, another credibility person, whether you believe him or not. We're not in court, so, he can say what he wants to say. But what happened was, and they didn't say this in the very beginning, in that yearbook, there was some other, writing in that yearbook. And basically, they didn't say at the time, meaning her lawyer, and neither did this woman say at the time, I wrote this in here because I wanted to remember who Roy Moore was. So only when they were called on it did they say, oh, yeah, that's right. Well, I did write in the book. But all along, they tried to make us, or it's seemingly so, to try to make us all believe that Roy Moore wrote all of that, even though it was pointed out a long time ago, the ink's different, the handwriting looks different, and all those things. Yeah. And also, we're not turning over the book. And it looks like it's more of a political move because Gloria Allred's like, well, if and when he's elected senator, then we're going to go and ask the ethics committee to look and see what he did. And then we'll hand over the yearbook at that time. So you can get your own expert at that time to say whether or not this is Roy Moore's handwriting.
Well, if he's, excuse me, if he's guilty of something criminal, even if it doesn't come out now, it'll come out. God has a way. God has a way of doing these things. All right. But right now, I got to, I'm in Alabama and I got to make a decision. I'm not literally in Alabama, but metaphorically speaking, putting myself in that situation. I'm in Alabama and I got to go make a decision based on what I know to be true. And what I know to be true is this man fought to keep the 10 Commandments in his courtroom. He has in some ways really stuck his neck out on behalf of biblical truths and things like that. So that's going to weigh heavy on my mind.
Absolutely.
And if he did something distasteful, I'm not talking about criminal now. If he did something distasteful, maybe something he shouldn't have done at that particular time, he's turned from it, he's repented of it. I'm not going to cast stones at him. I don't want people going digging up and what I did 40 years ago. And so those who would cast stones, get ready.
Yeah.
Get ready.
Well, I think, people, the way they're looking at it, and I would have to agree, this is all a political move, and it really is. And it is directed at Roy Moore, but it's more so directed at President Trump, even than it is Roy Moore. Susie said, we're praying Moore wins the election tonight. I don't believe he's guilty. He stood for the 10 Commandments, pro-biblical marriage. I think people are lying to discredit his good character. I think a lot of people believe exactly the same thing as you do, Susie. And he is also, anti-abortion. And, so that's another thing that people don't like as well.
Right. I mean, you think about the I don't even know what the right word to use is, but just how the people on the left are trying to make this man out to be some kind of a demon.
Yeah.
Walking around. And yet they want people to vote for someone who supports slaughtering babies in their mother's womb.
Yeah.
Gay marriage and all these unbiblical things. It's mind blowing. I mean, it really is just mind blowing.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And it is. And, I think one of the things too, and we know this it's a political move because I don't know if you remember Evan McMullen. He was an independent candidate.
Yeah.
I didn't like him as soon as I found out he was associated with the UN and had been a volunteer. That was, marked him off the list really early in the game. But he has a nonprofit organization and he spent $500,000 on an ad against Roy Moore. And he's done nothing but be anti-Trump, anti-Moore. He's also working with billionaires with a B to get more money. So you can kind of see where all this is going. And what's going to happen, I'll tell you what they want to do is get Roy Moore into the Senate and then start an ethics committee investigation on him. And then what they really want to do is, and they're doing it already, is they want to start an investigation on President Trump. Because of 3 women that have come forward from years ago, just like with Roy Moore 40 years ago, but 3 women that have come forward saying, this happened to me, and let's keep it clear. President Trump was not even a political candidate when all of these things supposedly happened. He wasn't in politics. He wasn't anywhere near the White House during this time that these women say these things happened. Now, I want to talk about what each of these women are saying because I think it's really important. And here's what I'm going to say. I've said this on my other shows and I really am very serious about that. There is a war on men occurring and I'm telling you, men, you're being minimalized. And if you don't realize it, you'd better wake up now because the storm is started and it's really coming. And this Me Too movement, it's sad because for those people who are truly victims, it's very sad. But for those people who aren't victims, this is a political movement. One of the women who said that I'll just say Donald Trump at the time, or Trump, because he wasn't president. What Trump did, she was sitting, getting her makeup on for one of the pageants she was in, and she was sitting there naked underneath her robe. So in other words, she was clothed and he came into the room while she was getting her makeup done by somebody else and there were other people in the room. So that's one allegation.
So he walked into the room and that's the accusation?
He walked into the room and she was naked under her robe. And as somebody pointed out, as always when I say this, we are naked under our clothes even right now. So there you go. And we're broadcasting. So,
Duly noted. Okay.
Duly noted. Okay. And so the second one said, I was a receptionist in Trump Tower. He came in, he kissed me on both cheeks, and she claims that eventually he kissed her on the lips. The third one said, I was in business class. They moved me up to first class on the plane. I was seated next to him. We had our dinner, and immediately afterwards, he was all over me. And at one point he tried to put his hand up my dress and I got up and I moved to another section. Okay. So the questions were to them, are you going to file any charges? Are you going to sue? What are you going to do? And they're like, one, especially the receptionist said, no, I think the better thing to do is to try this in the court of public opinion. And it's what you said earlier. That's where we've come to. It's not about, are these people innocent or guilty? You're guilty if I say you are in the court of public opinion. And nobody is going to question that, because if they do, then again, you're either a sexist, you're racist, you're homophobic, you're this, you're that, or whatever. And as Catherine's pointing out, there was a witness on the plane who said none of that ever happened.
Well, but you hit on what's really going on. They're going to try this in the court of public opinion, because in a court of law, they don't have to present any evidence. I mean, they would have to present evidence.
Right.
They would have to prove their case. And they know that the way the winds are blowing today, they don't have to do anything like that. So,
and as Sue said, that's all they have. I mean,
yeah, right.
Sue, I think that's all they have. Yeah.
I mean, look, how do I say this? I used to play music for a living a long time ago. And, we play clubs and different things like that. And I even did a little bit of theater and stuff like that. It's every night at the theater that people are in the back, getting changed, doing this, that. There's men, women, walking through all the time, So, I mean, come on.
I know.
I mean, I'm not saying that a man should walk in on ladies who are in the, in a state of undress or anything like that. But I'm just saying there's certain things, if you're gonna get into that world and participate in some of the things that, pageants and Hollywood and Broadway and things, that's the kind of thing that goes on,
Yeah.
So give me a break. I'm not saying that's a lifestyle to embrace. I'm not saying that. And I wasn't there to say he should have, he didn't do, I don't know. I'm just saying, if you're going to get in that world and you're going to be offended by somebody walking in the room while you're undressing or dressing, you shouldn't be there.
Well, I mean, if anybody's ever watched Project Runway, that the women come back off the runway, they strip down no matter who's there and put on new clothing. It's just something that's done.
And some of the clothing I've seen, Susan, a robe is more than they wear all night.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. And I'm not making excuses
for actual victims,
for people who've done things that are wrong. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying, if you're going to make an impression with me about these kinds of things, then you being in settings that's part of what goes on. I'm sorry. I don't really have a lot of sympathy there.
And here's the thing for me, like if you really did this, then what's going to help me to really believe what you said and believe what you're saying is true? Then go file a police report. Because if somebody touched you inappropriately, that's an assault and battery. Go file a police report, and then I'm going to start taking you seriously. Doesn't mean I totally believe you, but your credibility just went up a whole notch or two with me when you're willing to go in there. Because if you file a false police report in most states, that is going to be a felony. So if you're willing to risk a felony, then I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to really listen now to what you're saying. You're starting to be a lot more believable. Because as Catherine pointed out, she was saying that somebody on the plane was saying that, one of the women she was after him and not the other way around.
Okay. Well, you see, I can see that happening. I mean, I'm not saying that it did in this one because I don't know, I wasn't there, but I mean, I can see things like that happening.
Yeah.
And the main topic here is, though, or at least in my mind, is that there are all these accusations flying around. Mm-hmm. And there are going to be so many accusations, nobody's going to know what the truth is.
Exactly.
And there's going to be the potential, anyway, because of all these different accusations, for people who are actually telling the truth,
exactly,
who truly are victims of assault and these other kinds of things, that their voice is just going to get lost. Mm-hmm. It's nobody's going to take them seriously because of all this other stuff. Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's the real tragedy of it all.
Catherine's saying money causes these things. And a lot of times it does. And again, when you start making this about politics and you don't make it about the victim, then you're losing your credibility, and women's credibility, unfortunately, are going to be hurt, and the victims aren't going to receive justice as what we're talking about. The real victims, the one that really have a cause of action.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
There are a lot of women who have been victimized by men,
yes.
and a lot of them, it happens from people who are in their own family. Mm-hmm. I know this happens, and it happens a lot more than what we would ever like to admit to. So it is out there. So I don't want to sound like I don't believe any of this is, right. These ladies are true. But, I think of people like Juanita Broderick and what's some of the other names?
Catherine Willey.
Yeah, all these people that when it was convenient, they were just silenced. They were just ignored.
Right.
But now it's become politically expedient to 25 years later or more? 40. Oh, yeah, well, I think I believe them. Yeah, Bill Clinton should have resigned. Yeah. Give me a break. Give me a break. This is all politics.
It's all politics. And right now, 56 members, this is a group called the Democratic Women's Working Group, which consists of about 56 women. They're all coming forward and saying that we want, an investigation on Trump. We want ethics investigation. And really what they're saying is we want to try to find another way to impeach this president. Mm-hmm. We want to open up an investigation. We want to move forward. Now, the thing that isn't possible, you can't, at least I've never seen it, you can't convict somebody and impeach somebody for something that occurred outside of your being the president. So something that occurred before isn't something that is, involves you being a president that you did as you were president, as Bill Clinton did with Monica Lewinsky. And he was gotten because he lied. They didn't get him for that act. They got him because he lied about it.
Well, I said way back then, I'll say it again now. If Bill Clinton only lied when his lips were moving, that's the only time he ever lied. But anyway, I will say this. You texted me last week after Trump made the announcement that we're going to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And I told you, yep, today I'm a fan. And I applaud the president for doing that, having the courage to do that. I mean, even the guy that I always looked up to, Ronald Reagan, even he didn't do that.
Exactly.
So I'm like, yes, today I'm a Trump fan. And I say that because there's a lot of things that Trump has done, stood for, said that I, don't particularly care for, but I will give credit where credit is due. And when he does something like that, I say, good, that's great. And I support you and I applaud you. That leads into this. There is no doubt that at least in some ways, God is using this man. That does not mean that I feel he is a man of God necessarily. I don't know. I don't know what his heart is. All I can do is look at the fruit, but I do believe that it's becoming obvious that God is using him to do certain things. And so if he is God's man, and if there are people who are using every scheme and plot and every twist that they can come up with to try to come against this man, if he being used by God, if God put him there, then in reality, they are coming against God.
Yeah.
And woe be unto them.
Well, so it's true. I mean, look at what's happening though. And there, it's another example of the Democrats, the progressive left eating their own. They threw Al Franken under the bus. Now,
admittedly, cry about that.
I was happy. Okay. I'll admit it. What I'm saying was, Al Franken, Conyers, and Trent Franks, all of them themselves decided to step down. And Al Franken, you got a photograph. There's not too much you can do to say, I didn't do that. But nobody told them to step down, but they threw them under the bus, and especially Franken, so they could get at this president. And that's what they've done since before he even became president, and it's still trying to. And the more they do that, the more it comes out on people on their side and the wrongdoing on their side.
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's the point I'm making here.
Yes.
If he is God's man for this time, not necessarily a man of God, but if he is God's man for this time, and there are things that God is going to use him to do, then these people who are coming against him better watch out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And let's talk about how these people are in the last couple of minutes that we have, how they are coming against this president. Okay, in the beginning, we saw Russian collusion, Russia. That's all we could talk about. Now, they haven't proven anything. And even today, President Trump said, the only reason that you're pushing this whole thing with these allegations of sexual harassment and assault or whatever sexual misconduct is because you failed on the Russian collusion. You can't prove that, so you got to go into something else. Well, they went from Russia, and the next thing that they went into was, oh, wait a minute. I think this man, he's mentally ill. He's unfit to be the president.
He drinks too many Diet Cokes a day.
Well, that's coming next. That's their physical health now.
Yeah.
So we've done mental health. We've done physical health. He drinks too many Diet Cokes. He has 12 a day. He watches too much TV. And just coincidentally, we're coming up on a physical that is due in January. So let's get out that talk about him, not being physically fit now. Let's do that. And, at the same time, let's throw in a professor in psychological sciences that's going to say, well, not only is it physically bad for you, but it could cause dementia. Right. So they've come out with the whole dementia argument as well. It's one thing after the other to get this man out of the White House.
Well, I'll just say this. Haman in the book of Esther built gallows that he intended for Mordecai. And as it turns out, those are the gallows that his sons and he were hung upon.
Yeah.
So I go back to this position. If God has put Trump there to do certain things, and there are people who are trying to undermine that and stop that or reverse that, then in effect they are fighting against God, and they don't have a chance.
They don't have a chance. And what is so sad to see too is that when they can't get to Trump, what they're doing next, their next step is to go after Sarah Sanders, the White House press secretary. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, Brian Kareem, I guess, from CNN, when she wasn't giving him the answers that he wanted, when asking the same question over and over about the allegations against Trump, then it was, so are you saying, have you been sexually assaulted personally? What's happened to you? It's like, my God, have we just forgotten every bit of professionalism and standing up in front of people and doing our jobs professionally? I mean, are we just going to forget all about that?
It would not do for me to be the press secretary for one day. I would thin the herd. I'll put it that way.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Anyway.
And I'm thinking I probably would just be the press secretary for one day after I told somebody else.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
And she came close yesterday. You could see the look on her face. It's like, my God, if I get a crazy question like this one more time from Jim Acosta, she was going to be, she was going to be done. I was expecting her just to walk out and discuss. But as Catherine says, she's a soldier. And as Jeffrey said, God will always triumph. And as Sharon said, King David was not a perfect man, but God used him. And they're going to use anything, no matter how crazy Sue says, to try to get this president out. And everybody is absolutely right. And that's what I try to remind people about all the time. Everybody's a sinner. God couldn't use any of us if he looked at our sins, because he would just say, well, there's nobody here. But David was a sinner. President Trump is a sinner. Of course he is. He's a human being. And so I do believe as I've told you before, and I've said on this show, I do believe he was called for this time, that God put him in as president, because there's no way, the way that things were going and what the numbers showed and everything else, that Hillary Clinton wasn't going to win. That they had planned that down to the very last, dot the I's and cross the T's. So for him to be in the White House, I feel that it was ordained by God. So, that's.
Well, I believe that God is the one who sets up kings. He raises up nations. He brings down empires. I believe that when Obama was the president. I said the same thing. Obama, I don't believe he's a man of God, but I believe for this time, for whatever reason, he's God's man.
Yep.
So the same is true here. That being said, those who would come against God's man are coming against God.
Yep. Absolutely.
And they don't realize that, I don't believe.
I don't believe so either, but
God's going to make it clear to them, I'm sure.
Very soon, I think. We've run out of time. I thank you, everybody, for being here. For everybody, as we said in the beginning, happy Hanukkah. And we'll see you again next week. Thank you so much for all your comments and questions. Really love that. Please keep them coming.
Yes, thank you.
And God bless you. Take care. We'll see you again next week.